Welcome to the Porch Party with Litz and VCAP.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to another week of the Porch Party Podcast with Litz and BCAP.
Assalamu alaikum. How's it going? Eid Mubarak, by the way.
Eid Mubarak, brother. How was it?
Alhamdulillah, man. It was different. It was different, man.
Did you go do that fireworks display?
No, I didn't. But shout out to _Donlands, aka Uzair, for Instagram living that event, man. That looked crazy. There's so many fireworks, man. There's so many fireworks.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it, I think he still has it up on Instagram there. Go ahead and check it out, man. It was a lot of people had good things to say about it, mashallah. So this week we have a new sponsor for the show, and this is, I know VCAP was surprised by the sponsor. Your business is open, so I do encourage you guys to go and check out this business. Suhail Manjra opened up a medical clinic, okay? Bridalwood Medical Walk-in Clinic on 2900 Warden Avenue. So in Bridalwood Mall there, he's opened up a medical clinic. You can phone at 416-499-5964, or you can go online, bwmedclinic.ca. Now, Suhail, he told me he has a Gujarati doctor there as well, man. So if you want to send over your parents who are more comfortable with a Gujarati physician, go ahead and check it out. And he also told me, this is Aprawara. This is, someone that will take care of us, if you know what I mean. All right.
And I also hope, you said there, check out the business. I hope you don't have to. We hope you don't necessarily have to check it out. But if you are in need, or your parents or someone you know needs to go to the doctors, Sohail, mashallah, is a great guy, and him and his wife, they're doing something great for the community. So definitely, if you do need some medical advice or services, consultations, definitely check it out, inshallah, and support the community.
And Allah give the business more success. Allah give more Suhail and his family success as well, inshallah.
So let's obviously, with that being said, again, keeping with that community stride, I'd like to introduce our next guest. He is someone who's grown up in both the Donlands and the Scarborough community. He's definitely been around the block. He's grown up. He's similar to our guest last week, Uzair. He's kind of that middle area with, has good relationships with the older guys, with some of our guys and some of the younger guys as well. So without further ado, I like to call Shahid Sheikh to the podcast. Assalamu alaikum, Shahid. How are you?
Walaikum salam. How are you guys? I'm good.
Alhamdulillah, man. Eid Mubarak.
Eid Mubarak to everybody on the block. Unfortunately, I had work, so I couldn't attend any of the gatherings or anything like that. But this year's been awkward for everybody, so I hope everybody had a good Eid with their family and friends and loved ones.
Every time you're on the Donlands group, it seems like you're always working, and even getting your schedule for this podcast was a little tough, man. How many days a week do you work?
I work when I can, to be honest. If there's nothing going on that's worthwhile or that doesn't really interest me anymore, because as you get older, you get involved in different things and you have different interests. You kind of grow out of the old, just hanging around here and there. So it just depends. So most of my days are spent, especially now with the family and kids and whatnot. You kind of gotta time manage your life a bit more. So it's not like before where we could just wake up after Zohar Namaz, everybody meet up at Wilkinson, or if you're in 45, when I used to live in 45, just meet up at the wall in the back, and everybody meet up in Cornell. Things are different now.
Yeah.
So as with age, with different, once you get apart and get involved in different aspects of your life, you have different responsibilities. Gotta allocate whatever time you have. You all get 24 hours in the day, but you only got certain hours for certain people, right? So unfortunately, you get to miss out.
I'm listening to your kids in the background right now. I know we asked, but like, yo, move over to a quiet room. There's no quiet room in that house right now, eh?
Nah, man. Once you have kids, you realize there ain't no quiet room. You'll be lucky if you get some time alone. Because they're boys, right? Boys will be boys, and they're always gonna, like, if you have more than one child, they're always gonna be bickering or fighting, or Dad, can you solve this? He's not listening. He won't give me this. Things like that. But it's no different for anybody else.
And you're just there trying not to snap at them.
Nah, man. Honestly, I really don't get that mad at them that often. I'm pretty cut and dry with my rules. They they pretty much listen. It's their mom that they give a hard time to. But again, everyone's parenting style is different. I'm
Okay,
pretty
okay.
black and white with me.
They have that respect for your authority, yeah?
It's not authority. It's just you have to be. Parenting is different because like everyone has their own parenting styles and nobody likes to scold their own children, right? It's different from somebody else's child or a relative's son or whatever or daughter. When it's your own, you have to like groom them for the future. And I believe in being honest with them and blunt. I don't like
Yeah.
sugarcoating too many things because then I feel like a lot of parents, when you sugarcoat too many things with your children, you're not really preparing them for real life, especially with the changing of the times and things that are happening in our community and involvement. I'd rather let them be in the know and be
Mm,
aware of what's going on and what to expect, like etiquettes, how to behave in public, how to behave at home, how to behave with each other, with your siblings. You know, the usual things that we see with, like I noticed with some people's children when their relatives or guests are coming over, you know, things like that. They don't, a lot of kids will just shy away, go to their room or run in the basement. Nobody really does come over to do salam. You know, the things that we grew up. Well, at least
yes.
I did.
Let's talk about your career. Maybe that has some influence on your parenting style as well. Why don't you explain to everyone what you do right now?
Well, I've chosen a different kind of career path. Like it just kind of came out that way. Like for me, it's more about, I started off working back in the day when I was like, what, 18, 19, just 20s. I started working at the clubs. I used to
Mm,
be a bouncer. I used to work at the door or at the back or wherever backstage. I used to work at the
that's
docks, London Tap
that's the
House, things like
dream.
that. Yeah, but you know what? In our community, a lot of people didn't know what I used to do. So because it was kind of frowned upon, you know, haram, halal, this kind of stuff. So I
Yes.
usually kept it to myself. So then, as years went by, I ended up, you know, just following the same security field because my own personal reasons, right? Because family, this and that. I had my own issues at home, whatever. Like we all have different aspects in life that we bridges we got to cross. So for me, this was the easiest way to get to where I needed to be. So I did that for a bit. Then I got into I used to work at shops at Don Mills for Cadillac Fairview, which was in house. And I shifted to armored car. We used to have G4S armored car, so we used to deliver money to banks, ATM machines, retail stores, and stuff like that. So it looks cool, but the job ain't. It's not all what you see in movies, like armored or anything like that. It's
Yeah. I
quite
remember
boring to be
you
honest.
you used to talk. I think we talked about your time with the armored trucks, and you were telling me about they've armed you with certain guns and things like that, and the rate of you having to use it is pretty high too. Like the armored truck robberies and stuff like that, they happen. I don't know how often. Do you have any like numbers on that? That how often they happen?
Well, the stats will always change every year, but you're always going to get the general. The threat is always going to be there. So they
Mm,
notify us of what trends are going on, who's been casing out joystick, places like banks or retail stores or drop-off spots. When it comes to armored car, the it seems like it's a cool job because you're carrying a pistol, a firearm,
mm,
whatever you want to call it, and it's fun just when you do recall. So when you're at the range, it's like a guy or manly thing, if you want to call it that, to do. It's fun, but it's no different than being a licensed firearms owner. Like I don't know, a lot of people know, but I am one, so I'm not going to get into what I have or anything like that. But I will tell you that it's a lot of fun, and you get to learn a lot about firearms and calibers and the type of weapons you're allowed to have, you're not allowed to have, things that are prohibited. There's a lot of misinformation, not just within our community, but I believe in Canada as a whole. That's why they have the National Firearms Association, which try to promote educational information to everybody out there. Because governments will have their agendas. I know this is very like conservative talk or whatever, but they do have some good talking points, just as well as the people on the far left, the liberals or whatnot.
yeah.
I don't have any allegiance to any party. I fall in line with whichever party that has the best views that I feel that they should represent us as Muslim Canadians
Mm.
or Indo-Pak community. Doesn't really matter. You can go into whatever you want.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about conservative and liberal, and it's that idea that because we're brown, maybe first generation Canadians, we
Hmm.
shouldn't be into gun culture. Like, because of our background and identity, we should not have a gun culture. And it's interesting because yeah, the majority of us, I don't think we're into guns or we promote the use of guns. But obviously, you have a stance of you're pro gun ownership. And do you think maybe your career choice or the career path that you've had has influenced your opinion on that?
I wouldn't say it's career path. It definitely did have an impact into me getting involved. But I was always like interested, even as kids, when we grew up playing Atari or whatever, Duck Hunt,
Mm.
things like that. The interest was always there, playing video games or whatever the case may be. But for me, I got more involved because of the job that I had then. So I got to learn more. I got to realize what's real and what isn't. What's animated because of TV. Sorry,
Mm.
and what's there's a lot of misinformation. So like in terms of rules and regulations for ownership, for transporting and things like that, and things have as they've also evolved into becoming even more safer, and they become more strict as well. Like we have some of the strictest laws in our country compared to a lot of places, especially our neighbors down south, right? It's just madness there, and every state has a different law. There's open
Yeah,
carry states, there's concealed carry. Some places don't even have that.
yeah. For
Just like
those that
Canada.
don't, yeah, for those that don't know about gun ownership laws here in Canada, there's three classes of guns. And just correct me if I'm wrong, Shahid, about things. But there's prohibited
Correct.
weapons, restricted, and non-restricted weapons. And
That's correct. To break it down, so when it comes to prohibited firearms, there's a long list of them, like military style, where there's nobody allowed to carry that except for military and police, and even they have their restrictions as well, or there's certain um, limitations on what type of firearm they're allowed to hold. Now, I don't know all the details. I'm by no means any expert, but because I work with side by side with a lot of the people in the industry, and I kind of like I like to read and get informed about a lot of things we're allowed to have or not allowed to have,
yeah,
which goes back into I'll segue into that later, but about the new gun laws and this and that they're trying to promote. But there's prohibited, which kind of it's self-explanatory, and then there's restricted, which is your pistols
yeah,
and small arms, and then there's your long barrels, which is non-restricted. So long guns are preferably in like they're just semi-automatic. So for those who don't understand what semi-automatic is, it's not you can't hold the trigger down. For layman's terms, I'm going to break it down. You can't hold the trigger on, let the whole magazine get unloaded. You can't do that. That's a prohibited. So it's semi-auto.
Would you
So you
would you
can
have to
just
pull the trigger each time to
yeah,
release a
it's
bullet?
center fire. Yeah.
Okay.
So each time you want to fire a round, you would
Mm.
have to let go, release the trigger, and press the trigger again.
You talked about the current ban on weapons, and you said you disagreed with it. Well, what's the reason you disagree with it?
Well, there's for starters, I have a few reasons, but for starters, the main reason is that they're taking advantage of the general population in Canada, especially in the major cities. Even that survey that was done, it was only done in 5 major cities in Canada. Now, if you go
Which
outside of,
survey? Which survey?
I think it was CBC or Global News or somebody that did. It was on Twitter as well. Somebody did a lot. It even Global News has their own. They had their own survey done just yesterday or whatnot about the ban on guns. They're always trying to get stats to go a certain way to appease their public or appease their viewers, or just to make things go their way. Like for every
Mm.
time there's a crisis, politicians there's a saying that goes, "Don't let any crisis go to waste. You can use it to your
Yeah,
advantage," right?
yeah,
So the shooting that happened in the masjid, remember in Montreal,
yes.
why wasn't this done then? Okay, just
I'm
think
not
about
sure.
that. Just think about that
Yeah,
for a second now. Okay, now the shooting that happened in New Zealand. Okay,
yeah,
that prime minister, whatever, she decided to act on it right away. But
yes.
that's fine. They have their own issues. I don't know all the issues in New Zealand, or was it Australia? I think it was New Zealand, right?
New
Yeah,
Zealand.
right. Yeah. Okay. Now, New Zealand, if you look at their neighbors, we have a neighbor that's nowhere near close to what the type of neighbors that New Zealand has.
Yeah.
The world's biggest manufacturer for firearms is just south of us. And if you look at the size of our border, be realistic. You're in HCBSA. You know exactly how difficult it is to maintain that border security. Am I wrong?
I mean, it's the longest. I think it's the longest shared land border in the world.
In the world, exactly. Now I have family and friends that are in law enforcement as well, in the West Coast and here, and some of them that I have longtime friends that moved to within the borders of Canada, and they know that this ban that people that are frontline are saying is not going to do anything. It's not going to change. It's not going to
Yeah.
change. Everybody has their agenda, and this was a liberal promise that they made during their. And don't get me wrong, I love from all the idiots that were running for our prime minister's office. I think he is the best one suited with that resembles my views and whatnot. But there are things that obviously, like, you got to take ownership of whatever platform they're on. For me,
So,
I agree with what they're doing, but to a point, I feel like they're just overstretching their strength. What do you want to call it? How should I put this? They're overstretching their control into an area that's not really helping anyway.
mm,
You know what I mean? Like,
you think that this basically is like just to appease their voters and make sure that they can say,
100%. Think about it. You think they don't have these stats, but do you think the general public, ask around, if you get put a tweet out in a Dawnlands group or whatever app if you want, and ask the guys how many people think that all these gunfights are happening. You think all these guys are gangbangers or are licensed owners?
and so yeah, just to sum up your view, it's basically this gun ban law is banning legally owned firearms, but the gun violence that is happening, which this, I guess, law is proposed to address, the gun violence is happening through illegally obtained firearms from possibly the United States coming in, shipped in, and being sold to, I guess, gangs and things like that.
For me, this is really interesting. So, and the reason why it is because I've never met somebody, like us who's so well informed on guns. And I think perspective and, where you grew up, when you grew up, how much money you had, all of that I think plays a big factor in the view that you have on whatever the topic may be, right? Last year I went to South Africa and Litz did as well. And I met several people just like you and I, right? Gujaratis, Pakistanis, who had guns. And the perspective there is that, people need to have guns there because, first of all, because guns is also a form of sport. It's not only from the angle of violence, but it can also be taken as a form of sport, like you mentioned earlier. Secondly, it's so dangerous there that, you can't rely on the cops. Cops are really only for, if you're really wealthy, right? Otherwise, you have to have a gun if you want to protect yourself because there's robberies all the time, right? But just, again, going back to what I initially said about, speaking with you and you being so well-versed, us growing up, and even now, right, being someone of color, and it's interesting we're having this conversation the same week that everything in the U.S., specifically in Minnesota, that's happening, with the cop and, George Floyd and all of that. Because, being someone of color, you never necessarily have that luxury of growing up and, having a father with a gun who is able to, who has a license for it and is able to keep one at home, who is able to lock it away and, is educated in it, like someone like yourself, right? And I think a lot of it has to come from the angle in which we grew up. We just didn't grow up with that luxury, right? So, for someone like yourself, right, alhamdulillah, mashallah, you have a lot of knowledge in this. What would your advice be to this next generation, to the younger guys that are growing up on Dawnlands, in Thorncliffe, in Scarborough, and, other similar areas, coming from the perspective of color and knowing that, a Muslim walking in to get a gun license or to buy a gun may be viewed as a terrorist or whatever it may be, even if they were born and raised here versus, someone like a Caucasian person going in, it's just like, hey, you're just trying to buy a gun, here you go. Whereas someone of color they're always classified and racialized as something that is always less or always bad. What's your take on that? And what would your advice be to the next generation?
I think the best way anybody from our community, being a minority in a city or in the country or whatever, I think the best form of self-defense we can give anything, including our children. And our Nabi said, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said the same thing too. The best gift you can give anything, especially your child, is education. Now, I'm not a good student myself, but I try to be the best student that I can, regardless of what profession or what topic of discussion or anything. And I'm open to criticism. I can take it. I don't have a problem. If I'm wrong, everybody knows me. When I make a mistake, I have no problem apologizing.
I think that's a good point. Good point to wrap up on, for sure. Educate the community and promote leadership, for sure. Before we wrap up, VCAP is going to ask you some rapid fire questions so our viewers can get to know Shahid a little bit better. And
I don't know about that, man. I try to stay pretty private as much as I can, but I'll do my best. I'll be honest.
We're gonna try and crack you through our eye conscious segment. Are you ready?
I could always say no comment. You know that, right?
Yeah, you could do that. Are you ready, man?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
All right, let's go. Let's do it. Ready? Medina halal or Makkah?
Oh man.
Come on, man. It's a rapid fire. You gotta be quick.
To be honest, man. To be honest, that's a tough one, man. Because I just ate both the other day.
Quick.
Okay, hands down. If it's one of those situations where you know that's gonna hit the spot every time, no matter what, I'd say Makkah, and that's only for the kebab rolls.
Okay, fair
the
enough.
wraps.
Gai khichdi or dal chawal?
Dal chawal, bro.
Downlands or Scarborough?
I say Donlands. Donlands still home for me, man. Even though I live in Scarborough, but I can't afford the houses. You guys are ballers out there. I came from the bottom, I'm still making my way out.
Guns or cars?
I'd say cars.
Favorite gun?
I can't tell you that, man. Then people are gonna know what I have.
Most valuable possession?
My children.
Fair enough. Shout out Uzair Motala. And your favorite block memory?
There's a lot, man. I can't really narrow it down, but for me, because there's a lot of memories that we didn't have, but I think the best memories that we've had is bringing out the togetherness in the community and getting everybody to know each other. Was definitely not growing up in Wilkinson, because everyone still had their crews. I feel like having the Ramadan barbecues on the weekends, that's when we all sat together as a big community that brought everyone together. We see faces, we recognize people, we see, we get to recognize the next generation, the kids, this and that. For me, that is definitely the pinnacle of what our block represents.
All right, Chef. Appreciate having you on, brother.
All right, man. No problem. Anytime, man. Whenever I have time, actually. Whenever I have time.
That wraps up week 5 of the Porch Party Podcast with Lids and VCAP.
All right, guys. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.